Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Hello everyone. At this time, we want to present about critical discourse analysis. And the members of this group are: the first is Aprilia Rosanti, the next is Fariski Putri Ayu, and the last is Silviana. There are 7 chapter overview based on Brian Petruch. The first is Principle of Critical Discourse Analysis. The second, Doing Critical Discourse Analysis. The third, Critical Discourse Analysis and Gender. The fourth, Critical Discourse Analysis and Farming. The next is Critical Discourse Analysis and Multimodally, Critical Discourse Analysis and Identity, and the last is Critical Discourse Analysis and the World Wide Web. There are 4 points to conduct principle of critical discourse analysis. The first is social and political issues are constructed and reflected in discourse. Critical discourse analysis takes linguistic and psychosocial approach one step further by analyzing the data from a decidedly critical stage. This analysis examines the discourse, the social story, at play in the investigation, but also ask why the particular person is relating that particular tale. Critical discourse analysis examines the dominant and subordinate discourse on offer in society and explores notion of resistance and appropriation of discourse among various social actors. It simply mentions the process from the improvement and the way the general public might be consulted about it, in large part via written submission and a public assembly that might be held within sight the close of the future. The second is power relations are negotiated and performed through discourse. Principle of critical discourse analysis is that power relations are both negotiated and performed through discourse. One way in which this can be looked at is through an analysis of who controls conversation interaction, who allowed a person to speak and how they do this. In this case of the building of the apartment near my house, the 2 different texts I received gave very different impression of how people were encouraged to speak on the topic and negotiate different points of view on the development. The third is discourse both reflect and reproduce social relations. A further principle of critical discourse analysis is that discourse not only reflects social relations but is also part of and reproduces social relations. That is, social relations are both established and maintained through the use of discourse. And the fourth is ideologies are produced and reflected in the use of discourse. Another key principle of critical discourse analysis is that ideologies are produced and reflected in the use of discourse. These include ways of representing and constructing society, such as relation of power and relation based on gender, class, and ethnicity. Doing critical discourse analysis. A critical discourse analysis then might commence by deciding what discourse type or genre the text represents and to what extent and in what way the text conforms to it or not. It may also consider to what extent the producer of the text has gone beyond the normal boundaries for the genre to create a particular effect. The analysis may consider the forming of the text, that is, how the content of the text is presented, and sort of angle or perspective that writer or speaking is taking. Critical discourse analysis and genre. One day in which a question might be approached from an important attitude is via considering the genres which have been chosen for achieving a particular discourse intention. Critical discourse analysis and farming. A further way of doing an important evaluation is to look at the manner wherein the content material of a text is used. This is the manner wherein the content of the text is supplied to its target market and the sort of perspective, angle, and slant the author or speaker is taking. Related to this is what is foregrounded and what's background inside the textual context. This is what the writer has selected to emphasize the emphasis or intent makes the textual contents. Critical discourse analysis and multimodality. The multimodality approach is clarified in a number of landscape texts which give overview of the spell. Its words come on to find this technique across clarity paintings which pulls on multimodality and form the idea for earlier K texts.
Next is critical discourse analysis and identity. The issue of how identity is constructed in the use of discourse is also an area of interest in critical discourse analysis. For example, the discussion about how the family in US use language to create and socialize each other into shared family political identity as Democrats. Another example is online communities. Online communities are a further example of where social relations and identities are constructed through people's participation in the community's activities and their interactions with each other. It means that identities are constructed moment by moment through the use of discourse and the process of conversational interactions. Next is critical discourse analysis and the World Wide Web. One way in which the scale of text used for critical analysis can be explained is through the use of texts that are available on the World Wide Web. Using material from the World Wide Web always without its problem. Why? Because it is often impossible to identify the search of text on the web, difficult to determine which texts have more authority on a topic than others on the web, and difficult to find who in fact is writing the web, and texts on web often rely on more than just words to get their message across, and texts on the web are also more subject to change than many other pieces of writing. The World Wide Web has been used productively to carry out critical discourse studies which draw on strength of the web's capacity to collect a lot of relevant data. Next is discourse constitutes society and culture. According to Verkloof and Wodak, it means that every instance of language use makes its own contributes to reproducing and transforming society and culture, including relations of power. Discourse is a form social practice which both constitutes the social world and is constituted by other social practice. In critical discourse analysis, language as discourse is both a form of action, according to Austin, through which people can change the world, and a form of action which is socially and historically situated and in a dialectical relationship with other aspects of the social. And here Verkloof suggests that if discourse is only seen as constitutive, this corresponds to claiming that social reality emanates only from people's heads. According to Verkloof, family as an example of how the social structure influences discursive practice.
Critical discourse analysis addresses social problems. Critical discourse analysis provides theories and methods for the empirical study of the relation between discourse and social and cultural developments in the different social domains.
Next is power relations are discursive. The aim of critical discourse analysis, or CDA, is to shed light on the linguistic discursive dimension of social and cultural phenomena and process of change in late modernity. Discourse encompasses written, spoken, and visual image. Visual image must take account of the special characteristics of visual semiotics and the relationship between language and image. Within critical discourse analysis, there is tendency to analyze pictures as if they are linguistics area. There is critical discourse analysis explains how social relations of power are exercised and negotiated in a truth discourse, according to Fairclough and Wodak. And according to Fairclough, he is understand that social structure as social relations, both in society as a whole and specific institutions, and as consisting of both discursive and non-discursive element. Discursive, through which texts are created, received, and interpreted, are viewed as an important form of social practice which contributes to the constitution of the social world, including social identities and social relations. Research in critical discourse analysis has covered areas such as organizational analysis.
Well, I'm Sylviana. The next point of theory of fair love is discourse does ideological work. Discourse also does ideological work. In other words, ideological are often produced through discourse. To understand how ideologies are produced, it is not enough to analyze texts. The discursive practice how the texts are interpreted and received and what social effect they have must also be considered. So, critical discourse analysis has, for instance, addressed the ideological character of discourse. Take, for example, the common essential control of public finance as being in all essential analogs to household budgets, a construal beloved by former British Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher and by many others politicians, so that for instance government have to budget and save just as households do. So this is open to normative critique as a false claim in the analogy doesn't stand up to serious economic scrutiny and as an ideological one in the sense that it is a discourse that can contribute to sustaining an unjust and inequitable socio-economic order. Fifth point, discourse is historical. Thus, discourses can only be understood with reference to their historical context. In accordance with this, critical discourse analysis refers to extra-linguistic factors such as culture, society, and ideology in historical terms. Wodak would have us believe otherwise when she claims that theories by George Lakoff have had a large influence on her work. However, I can see no real trace of lack of anywhere in the discourse historical approach, which she advocates. This is not determined to this particular approach. They have their own equally valid theoretical backgrounds and methodologies. Yeah. The sixth point is the link between text and society is mediated. Fairclough studies this mediated relationship between text and society by looking at orders of discourse. Discourse practice, the production and interpretation of text, is an essential dimension of the discourse event which mediated between text and social practice. Equally important, therefore, is its corresponding dimension of discourse analysis at the interpretation stage. At the description stage, critical discourse analysis has shown how ideology is encoded in text, but this is just the first stage in the discourse process. A complete account of the communication of prejudice must necessarily address both the production and interpretation of text. And this entails a cognitive approach to discourse, accounting for meaning constructions at both ends of the discourse process. The second point is discourse analysis is interpretative and explanatory. So critical discourse analysis goes beyond textual analysis. It is not only interpretative but also explanatory in intent. This interpretation and explanation are dynamic and open and may be affected by new reading and new contextual information. The principal aim of critical discourse analysis is to uncover opaqueness and power relationship. So, critical discourse analysis is a socially committed scientific paradigm. It attempts to bring about change in communicative and socio-political practice. The eighth point is discourse is a form of social action. I shall now consider the roles that social actors are given to play in representation and aspect representation, which also plays a significant part in the work of many critical linguists. Who is represented as agent or actor, who as patient or goal with respect to a given action. This question remains important, for there need not be concurrence between the roles that social actors actually play in social practice and the grammatical roles they are given in text. Yeah, representation can reallocate roles, rearrange the social relation between the participants.
Okay, it is all about our presentation. Thank you.